modeled certain things, that you grew up learning certain things. But it is your responsibility to check and see if that still fits. Is that still right? Is that still right for you?
We love evolving. The essence, the belief, the perception, the emotions, all of the insights that come from evolving, having progress, having growth, having direction. Like you could say that's a quote unquote culture, right? Like our culture is to evolve.
Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where leaders like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. I am your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I am your host, Emilia Smith. Welcome back to another episode for those of you joining us again to 105. 105 is all about what is culture and how has it shaped you. We're going to be digging into our personal experiences with respects to culture and how it shaped us so that we can get those mirror neurons in your brain firing to get you to contemplate this question of how has culture shaped you and what truly is it. But before we get into our episode, if you haven't already listened to episode 104, Key Players for Your A Game, dive back to that. We had a phenomenal Out of the Mud. We're recording this the day after Out of the Mud, which is our free live virtual event where we brought all of our theme from April, all the podcast episodes into one event. And it was absolutely extraordinary. And that episode really helped to kick off that conversation. So jump back to that. But while we kind of do that bridge, let's get into what is culture. So for purposes of this conversation and honestly, to set the framework for the rest of the month, for those who are new listeners, what we have done at Evolve Ventures is planned out the month with a ton of different topics that have some aspects, some component rooted within culture. And so Bianca and I thought it would be a great idea, as we do pretty much for every single month, is ground in the roots of what is it? The month's theme is culture. And so we want to take a look at it. Where are we coming from and what is our intention and how can we bring that forward in this episode so that you know who you're listening to and where we're coming from, so that also while you simultaneously hear and listen and connect with this, you can kind of explore your own story, your own interaction and your own perception of culture and what that means to you. So to get us started, like I told Bianca prior to getting into this episode, I'm like, don't worry. The nerds got you. We got the definition coming forward. So for those of you who have been listening and who know me, I love to really dig into the etymology of words and to understand where things have come from and what it is to really define it. I go to one of my best friends, which is the thesaurus/dictionary, and try to kind of figure out like, what is the root? Where did it start? And I always find myself back at really picking apart what the word, like what was the root of it? And so always, obviously, words go back down to Latin and the meaning in that from the English dictionary, right? Culture in essence is in Latin cultura. And that stems from the word colore. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but
it sounds nice.
It does. It sounds fancy. But this means to cultivate. So essentially, if you were to think of like the word culture, some of the synonyms are to grow, to change, that have direction, progress, and at Evolve Ventures, evolve. So kind of looking at it from that frame of like the root, like culture meaning to grow, to change, to have a direction, to evoke progress, right? In terms of like the human aspect of culture, because like you can think of it as like a biological type of culture, right? For all those science people out there. But for the majority of us, we look at it from like a human standpoint, right? From that human lens where it really comes down to the patterns of activity, symbolic structures that typically give activities meaning, significance, and importance, right? So like if we're thinking about all our quote unquote cultures, you're thinking about probably what activities do our culture do? What gives our culture meaning and what's important to our culture? What has in essence, some significance to it. And human culture, as we look at it, there's oftentimes like a lack of fixed boundaries, which I think is going to be really cool to get into in this month, because where there's a lack of fixed boundaries, that always means, like, honestly, when you're thinking about it, a constant influx, development, where culture is constantly interacting, competing, collaborating with one another and all the different facets of it. So like you could, in a nutshell, say culture is the essence or all of the ways of life, including those that are passed down generationally. So speaking of that, I have like a ton of little bubbles on the my Remarkable right in front of me that I have prepped for this episode. But really, when it comes down to it, you can look at culture in a couple of different things. Bianca just said my audio is really loud. Sorry, everyone, if you're wincing. I'm not going to change that in real time, but I'll simmer down now. But really, when
why she's screaming? She's excited. That's why.
She
loves talking about culture.
I love culture. Yeah. So like, if you looked at some of these bubbles, when it comes to what our brain recognizes or identifies culture as or with, what is culture, right? Some of the bigger ones that I think that are most important to talk about are beliefs, perceptions, emotions, norms, social behaviors, capabilities, laws, customs, attitudes, values, and practices. You can incorporate like art, insights, patterns, material traits, structures, boundaries, like so many different things can fall underneath this word culture. And so what it is like I said, all ways of life. So how you slice that definition is really predicated on what you want to, like, what component of life do you really want to zoom in on? And so with that being said, there's what I think is really cool. And Bianca and I being, the women at Evolve Ventures, we love evolving. The essence, the belief, the perception, the emotions, all of the insights that come from evolving, having progress, having growth, having direction. Like you could say that's a quote unquote culture, right? Like our culture is to evolve. And that's in like everything that we do. It's in the fabric of who we are. And prior to this episode, I was doing a little bit of research, and you can't really talk about culture without talking about evolutionary theory, especially when it comes to, okay, this is all ways of life. If you look at the patterns, the activity, and the symbolic meaning that is given or structures that are given to society as a result of what our definition of culture is, you got to take a look at the biological framework, at least of evolutionary theory. But here's the thing. When it comes to culture, we have, varying schools of thoughts, depending on what scientists you're really looking at. Who here has heard of Darwin's theory, right? A lot of us, when we come and speak about evolutionary theory, oftentimes our brains are jumping over to Darwin. Now, there's so many links that are going to be linked in the show notes here so that you can dig into that and learn. But, what you'll find as you start to kind of peel away the layers is that Darwin's theory really focused in on the evolution of our species, our society, as an individual. It wasn't really around the collective. And that's what I think is really cool about culture, because culture focuses on evolution as a collective phenomenon. What do I mean by that? When you are a part of a group, you will likely assimilate a culture to, or start to adapt to the environment, the people, the behaviors that you're around. Now, Darwin's theory was really focused on the individual. And when it comes to evolution and culture, like, you got to ask yourself, hey, was Lovelock the one who had the evolutionary theory that was about the collective, the collaborative of the human species? Was Darwin kind of like off his rocker here? Was he not looking at the whole picture? And so that's a whole nother can of worms that we would go down if we could. But for right now, I want to just focus in on cultural phenomenon, right? Groups of people thriving, surviving. One of the biggest things that culture has, I don't want to say just done for me, but how it shaped me was, like I was mentioning to Bianca earlier, before this podcast episode, was it taught me so much on how to survive as an individual in society, because my brain has been so eloquently wired through conditioning, through social programming, to be hypersensitive, hyper alert, hyper vigilant, meaning focus ridiculously in on how to survive in an environment, how to thrive, how to belong. And so with that, I've developed a ridiculous amount of skill set to be able to understand people, societies, cultures. You know, I'm very grateful to have traveled literally around the world and seen, quote unquote, different cultures in action, and have had a natural drawing to learning about different cultures. And so there's so many insights that can be extracted when you really start to zoom in on what is culture and how has that shaped you. And if you can have a curiosity about how has that shaped other people, especially those around you, you can really develop the skill set that you might have been initially born with. I'm really excited, and this is the last thing I'll say here, but I'm really excited for when this episode will drop. The Monday before this episode, we will have had a meeting with our team to understand what culture means to them. And that will be through a little bit of rumbling and understanding. But what's going to be really cool is that I doubt that there will be two definitions that are the same, and how culture has shaped them is going to look ridiculously different than how it shaped Bianca and I, because we're in all different time zones, right? Different ages, all that jazz. So really cool. So that's what culture is to me and how it shaped me. B, tell us all the things about what culture is to you and how it shaped you.
So before I get into that, the day that this comes out is June 2nd, I believe, which means it is officially Pride Month. So happy Pride to all of our LGBTQIA plus individuals. Hey. For anyone watching this, you can see I finally put the Pride flag up on my background, or on my wall. And I specifically did that because I really want to start to embrace one of the cultures that I am in, which is gay culture, gay pride. And it's very fitting that the first episode where this shows is the first day of Pride Month. So yay. Emilia's cheesing.
Thank you for saying that. Cool you.
It's interesting because if you think about it, every single one of us are a part of multiple different cultures. Emilia and I are both part of the female culture, right? We are both born biologically female, and we both go by feminine pronouns. Mm-hmm. Okay. I was also born into Middle Eastern culture, which has its own sets of rules, beliefs, descriptions, ideologies, phenomenons, whatever you want to call it. I am also in the millennial culture. I was born in 1995, as was Emilia. She was born in 94. Mm-hmm. And so we are both part of the millennial culture. We are part of the business culture, the tech culture. We are both part of a leadership culture. Mm-hmm. And to Emilia's point, the cultures that you assimilate with and that you ascribe to, I don't know if I said that word correctly, but whatever, is going to shape your identity and therefore shape what you think, do, feel, how you act, how you go about living in the world. And I've talked about this on the show very often, but there is a theory called social learning theory. It was posited by Albert Bandura. And this theory basically describes how we as human beings learn and how we become part of society. and humans as a whole, and not a specific society, but just society as a whole. So growing up, we learn by the models around us. So number one, where are you born? Where specifically? If you were born in Saudi Arabia versus if you're born in Miami, Florida, you're going to have a very different life just based on the location that you were born and nothing else. Who is the family you were born to? What is the city you were born to? Who are the people in that environment? What are the beliefs, the thoughts, emotions, feelings, the assumptions, the rules, the regulations of the specific area that you were born into, to the people that you were born into, school that you go to? All of these different phenomenon, they shape your identity, which is shaped by the culture. So the culture you are born in shapes your identity. It shapes what you believe is right and wrong. It shapes what you believe you should be. So a lot of, there's a joke between like a lot of foreign ethnic cultures, like Middle Eastern culture, for example, where your occupation is doctor, lawyer, engineer, or failure. And it's like, that's the ideology of the culture. Their culture and my culture, right? The Middle Eastern culture, it's very tangible driven. It's very image and appearance driven. That's what they value, the values of that culture. They aspire to things like that. So you take that culture, which is also very homophobic, and then you take the fact, I'll speak for me, for example, I am part of the LGBTQIA community. I am involved in that culture. So you take two cultures with very opposing beliefs, very opposing values, very opposing aspirations. And that's why a lot of people end up feeling like they're in crisis, because their two cultures and the two identities of those cultures don't mesh. And it's like you have this crisis of identity, this crisis of faith of, I don't know who I'm supposed to be. And this is why I believe it is so important to create your own culture or find a culture that fits for you. So for example, us at Evolve Ventures, we have created our own culture, our own set of beliefs, our own values, our own aspirations, our own ideas, our own ways of doing things based on the collective cultures that everyone within our team is coming in with, and how we combine that to give everybody a voice. It's wow, it's interesting. So I was at the gym yesterday, and I actually didn't tell you this. I was at the gym yesterday after Out of the Mud, and I'm doing my cardio, and someone from our old Muay Thai gym, his name is Aaron, I'm going to shout him out. He stops me and he's like, B, I know you're busy. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I really just want to thank you. And I was like, whoa, this is coming out of left field. He's like, I really want to thank you. And he said, your voice and everything that you've done and everything that you are fighting for and working for, embracing who you are, has given me the permission to do the same. And we ended up having like a 40-minute conversation about how his culture and the way that he grew up and the things that he experienced, and how he's been looking for a group of people that are going to accept him and be there for him in a culture where he can really thrive. And I was like, my friend, you have talked to the right person. Like, let me introduce you here. The culture, and not because I think we're like these extraordinary beings or whatever, but I just know what this culture, the culture that we have created, has done for me and has done for so many people. And it could be a beautiful opportunity for him. We need to really look at how our culture has shaped us, how the people in our life have shaped us. And really take responsibility for how we are acting based on that too. Emilia and I had a really intense conversation the other day about how we go through certain things and those things aren't our fault, but what is our responsibility is what we do afterwards. And so, no, it is not your fault you were born into a certain culture. No, it is not your fault that you were modeled certain things, that you grew up learning certain things. But it is your responsibility to check and see if that still fits. Is that still right? Is that still right for you? Because me growing up in a Middle Eastern culture that said that gay people go to hell and God will never love you if you're gay, and to the extreme, certain Muslim communities will literally kill you for being gay. Having to learn to take the parts of that culture that do fit for me, that I do ascribe to, that I do believe in, like community and love and faith and family, and taking that in and taking the pieces that fit for me and getting rid of all of the other ones. See, our culture, the one that we're born into, shapes us, but we get to decide how we shape ourselves going forward with that. And that's the point that I really want to drive home here is it is all of our responsibility to determine what the culture is and what the identity is that we want to form from that, and the people that we want to be based on that, and then what we intend on doing with that, and how we intend on shaping our communities with that, and our kids and all future generations. It is of the utmost importance that we become very clear on, for us, what is right and what is wrong and what no longer fits and what is going to be the best for you and everyone around you. And just for right now, I'm talking specifically about culture. Does it make sense to believe that someone is going to burn in hell because of their sexual orientation? I know everyone has religious beliefs, and I'm not saying your religious beliefs are wrong by any means. But really think about that for a second. Do you as a human being believe that is right? And if so, what is shaping that? And again, this is not to attack anybody, but it really is to just ask questions and to hold that mirror up. And to say, in what other ways has what I've been taught in the past shaped me? And does that still fit for me? And I will leave that off on there.
I'm really glad you said that, babe, because one of the things that what you said just really brought up for me was one thing that I take a lot of pride in, and not from like a overly egoic, arrogant sense of space, is that natural curiosity that I have, that I've developed, that I've cultivated, that I've really given love to, has enabled me to bring in so many different aspects of cultures and different cultures and have reverence for them, right? Like if you were to, like, example, walk through a garden, and if you could imagine walking through the garden and seeing a wide, diverse range of different flowers and different grasses, and you were given permission by the gardener, the master gardener there, to take a flower with you as you went along, that really inspired you, that really pulled you from a space that came from inside your heart, your soul, what really aligned to your inspiration, your creativity, your spirit. And you walk through this garden, picture it like the size of a football field, right? It's a huge garden. By the time you're on the other end, some of us might have picked a huge bouquet. You might have a whole wheelbarrow of different flowers, different grasses, different types of plants. Others of us might have a small little bouquet, of a couple ones that really just were so sacred and were absolutely everything to us. I feel as though through my life, it's been like walking through that garden.
Mm.
And that imagery really like makes me so happy to think about, because the more my curiosity has led me through the garden of life, the more I've been able to distinguish between what flowers serve me in the future that I want to create versus those that I've seen actually hinder and hurt a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point, you know, one of my favorite quotes, and we have it hung right above our fireplace, so I see it every single day when I'm done doing my mobility, is be the change you wish to see in the world.
Mm.
And every single day, my curiosity by learning who people are and where they come from and their perspective, their perception, that helps me to understand, in their garden, is there a flower that might be worth kind of celebrating, you know, and giving a round of applause and taking with me as I form my own cultures in my day-to-day. And to kind of bring this down on an actual practical level, like, for example, every single part of my daily routine has a different culture integrated within it. Like, for example, I have like a Japanese tea practice that's very strong in Japanese culture that I've kind of taken with me after learning about it, because I really, really resonated with the deeper meaning of it. Right. There's different practices from African culture that I've taken in and applied to my life, from all sorts of Australian, Kiwis, New Zealand, like different cultures have brought me so much enrichment to my life. And I can't even imagine where I would be if it wasn't for the differences, the uniqueness in each culture. Right. So for each one of our listeners, imagine that garden of life that you're walking through and pick up the flowers that really serve the future that you aspire to create. And realize that it's 100% in your power and in your responsibility, to what Bianca said, to create that culture, to create that vision, and to, like Bianca did with Aaron in the gym, like, hey, we have this culture over here. It really might serve you, right? This flower might really inspire you, right? That could change someone's life. So that being said, I know that's essentially this episode. Bianca, key takeaways, and then we'll go into episode suggestions, unless you have anything else to add.
No, I feel complete. Do a little reflection on the cultures that you've been involved in, that you were born into, and try to see how they've shaped you, how the beliefs, ideas, values, aspirations of the people around you have shaped you and yours. And really ask yourself, does it fit for you? And where can you change? And where can you grow? And where can you evolve into a culture that fits better? Maybe create your own. Maybe find one that is more aligned with what you really believe. Because there's no shortage of people out there, and there's no shortage of cultures out there and communities that really can help you become more and better and a more beautiful version of yourself.
It's beautiful. The only thing that I would say to that is the culture that doesn't fit you, like, don't try to fit into culture. Have cultures fit you. And I say that because any culture, from my perspective, and don't take this as gospel, contemplate on your own accord, but the only wrong culture for you is the one that suppresses who you feel and believe you aspire and need to be. Yeah. I've been there. I've been in cultures that are like, yeah, I'm not for this. I don't want to fit into this box. And honestly, there's an intuitive feeling that I should get the F out of here, and trust that. Don't let culture suppress you. It's really easy for them to.
Beautifully said, my friend.
Thank you, love. Episode suggestion on your end. We're going to take it down from 3 to 1 per Bianca and I, so that you have 2 episode suggestions after this episode to bounce into if you liked this topic.
Mine is number 34, why your environment predicts your success.
And mine's 70, your need for belonging is screwing you.
We've suggested that one a lot.
True. Honestly, you go back down to the brain science, you start to realize, like, oh, that's why I did some of those things.
It's fitting.
I see. It for sure is. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Stay tuned for the rest of this month, all things culture, and from the Evolve Ventures lens of things. We're grateful you joined us today.
Bye.